I know this. Sometimes when you come in contact with a sword, it hurts, right? It's a little painful. It wounds you. The sword is described in Ephesians chapter 6 as a thing that we use, right, for offense and defense against the devil, against our adversaries. But it's also the thing that points inward on us when we're studying the Word itself. So sometimes when you walk away from the Word, you should feel wounded. You should feel injured. Paul even tells Timothy that to use the Word to reprove, that is correct, to rebuke, and to encourage. That's what the Word's there for. So I hope from our Bible studies and from your own personal Bible studies that you leave sometimes feeling encouraged and sometimes feeling wounded. I hope that in each lesson that we talk about, that you feel in some way all those things, encouraged and wounded as well. But I want to make sure that I don't leave behind the responsibility to reprove and to rebuke and to wound myself and to wound you. If we go in the Scripture just looking for encouragement, then all we're looking for is prosperity, and we're looking for things that the Bible doesn't offer us. So we're going to talk about the Word tonight, and then maybe some things that wound you as they wound me and have wounded me, but some things hopefully that will encourage you as well. But what I want to do is I want to look at 1 Peter or 1 Peter as a whole. We're going to look at probably half of it today and the other half next week. But chapter 3, verse 15. One of the most popular verses in the book, used a lot by apologists. It says, "In your hearts honor Christ, the Lord is holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that's in you. Yet do it with gentleness and respect." Okay, so here's what it says. Your responsibility as a Christian is to always be ready to give a reason for your hope. Now, the way that's often used by apologists is you need to always be ready to give an answer to the tough questions and talk about the existence of God and all that stuff, which is not really true. In the context of 1 Peter 3, what he's talking about is what he's said already. So, back to 1 Peter chapter 1. The way that Peter opens up his letters is very similar to the way that Paul does it, which is he opens it up with the reason that you are so rich as a Christian, that all you have as a Christian, the things you have as someone who Jesus has chosen, and hope is one of his main themes. For instance, look at verse 3 of chapter 1. "Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. According to his great mercy, he has caused us to be born again to a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, to an inheritance that is imperishable, undefiled, unfading, kept in heaven for you, who by God's power are being guarded through faith for a salvation ready to be revealed in the last time." Hallelujah. Verse 13. "Therefore, preparing your minds for action and being sober-minded, set your hope fully on the grace that will be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ." Verse 20. "He was foreknown before the foundation of the world, but was made manifest in the last times for the sake of you, who through him, that is Christ, are believers in God, who raised him from the dead and gave him glory, so that your faith and your hope are in God." It is in that context that then in chapter 3 he goes on to say, always be ready to give a reason for your hope. But he's already told you what that reason is. Right? According to verse 3 through 5, the reason for your hope is the resurrection of Christ. According to verse 13, it is the grace of Christ. According to verse 20 and 21, it is the security of Christ. Right? It is the future of Christ, the perfection of Christ. The reason you as a Christian have a responsibility to always be ready to give, always, no matter what, in season and out of season, is the reason that Christ is the reason that gave you the hope. Christ is the reason for your hope. Remember with David and Saul back in the Old Testament, one of the things that made Saul so upset was when they marched into the city, they were crying out, "Saul has killed his thousands, but David his tens of thousands." Made Saul upset because they were liking David more than him. Well, that was literally right after David kills the Goliath. Right? He killed Goliath and he marches back in the city, and the city is just going nuts over David. Right? Saul has killed his thousands, which he literally had, right, by his armies. David his tens of thousands. David hadn't killed tens of thousands. He killed one guy. He killed one dude. Right? And now they're marching in saying David has killed his tens of thousands of people. But that wasn't actually the case. But if you go back to Israel in that time period and you say, hey, what's the reason for your hope? Why do you have security? They'd tell you because David's king. Because David's the king. You see what he did to Goliath? That dude could kill anything. That dude's in charge. If you would ask them the reason for your hope, they would have said, man, we have King David. We have the same thing now in a far better way. Someone asks Christians the reason for your hope, we can say, oh, because of King Jesus. Because of our Lord. Because of our Christ. Because of the one that's in charge. Saul his thousands, but David his tens of thousands. The reason for the hope of the Christian is because of Jesus. Okay, now, chapter 2. Notice how it starts. So, now, you can't start like a book with the word so, right? You have to have some before. It's like the word therefore, right? Something my preacher always says is when you see the word therefore in the Bible, you have to ask what the therefore is there for. Same thing with so. So what? So, since Christ has done all this for you, right? Since Christ has won this battle for you, since Christ has given you all these amazing reasons for hope, so put away all malice and all deceit and hypocrisy and envy and all slander. Like newborn infants long for spiritual milk. So he says, so, since Christ has done all these things for you, since he's given you this great reason for hope, strive to become godly. Strive to be better. Because Jesus, then you. And we talked about this last week. That's the way Christianity goes. That's the way Christianity should always and will always work. Jesus did this, so in response to that, you should this. Jesus saved you, so in response to that, live as if you've been saved. That's what Christianity is. That's how Christianity works. Look at back in chapter 1, verse 13. Show you this theme throughout the whole thing. Let's see. Preparing your minds for action, being sober-minded, set your hope fully on the grace that will be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Okay, since he's done this for you, verse 14. As obedient children, we'll come back to this verse in a second, do not be conformed to the passions of your former ignorance. But as he who called you is holy, you also be holy in all your conduct. Since it's written, you shall be holy, for I am holy. And if you call on him as Father, who judges impartially according to each one's deeds, conduct yourselves with fear at the time of your exile. Here's Peter's message. He says, since Christ has done so much for you, you should live in a manner that's worthy of Christ. Not, hey, if you live in a manner worthy of Christ, maybe he'll save you. But since he has saved you, you should live in a manner worthy of Christ. Chapter 2, verse 11. It says, Beloved, I urge you, as sojourners and exiles, to abstain from the passions of the flesh, which wage war against your souls. Keep your conduct honorable. Chapter 4, verse 1. Since therefore, there's that since again. Since therefore Christ suffered in the flesh, arm yourselves with the same way of thinking. Verse 2. So as to live for the rest of the time in the flesh, no longer for human passions, but for the will of God. For the time is past that suffices for doing what the Gentiles want to do, living in sensuality, passions, drunkenness, orgies, lawless idolatry. With respect to this, they are surprised when you do not join them in the same flood of debauchery, and they malign you. But they will give account to him who is ready to judge the living and the dead. Whew, strong. Chapter 5. Last one. Verse 8. Be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Resist him, firm in your faith, knowing that the same kind of suffering are being experienced by your brothers throughout the world. Okay, here's the way that the epistles always work. Paul and Peter both. It's first that lay out the riches of the grace that's been lavished upon you as a Christian, what God has done for you, the great things he's done for you. And then, after they show you the wealth of yourself as a Christian, they say, all right, now, because of that wealth, because of what Christ has done for you, because of the amazing hope that he's given you, you should try to live holy. And if you're not trying, then you didn't actually get the grace part. Right? If you're not striving for holiness, then you need to go back to chapter 1, because that's where you must start. Because of what he's done for you, then you should try to live holy. You should try to avoid these passions of your former ignorance, which he calls them in 1:14. Grace doesn't lower the standard by which God expects you to live. It actually ratchets the standard up. Like, we have this idea that in the New Testament, when God comes in with grace, and all of a sudden, we can do whatever we want. We're under grace. Hey, Renee, you really shouldn't be snorting cocaine. Whoa, bro. All right, legalist. You know what I'm saying? Old Testament. You're rather grace, right? I'm under grace, not under law. Don't tell me what to do. It doesn't work that way. Grace doesn't lower the standard. Grace ratchets the standard up from which God expects of you. Have you heard the Sermon on the Mount? From what Jesus said, he said, actually, no, it's not just adultery, he says. It's actually lust. That's the problem. Right? Lust is adultery. Can you imagine the men in the audience? Right? We hear that now. We've heard it our whole lives, so it's nothing. But imagine the men and women, too, that hear that for the first time. And it's not just adultery, Jesus says. It's actually your lust is adultery. What? Lust is adultery? I imagine dudes just picking up their chairs, throwing over their shoulder. Not for me. Mom, I told you this was ridiculous. I'm trying to get some free wine. So much for all those bottles of water I brought out here. Right? It's just not what I'm in for. I'm not in for this. I'm not in for this lust adultery stuff. That's ridiculous. And then he goes on and he says, and by the way, not just murder, actually. Actually, if you get mad at somebody to the point that you want to do that, that's actually murder. right? A minute ago, these guys were looking good, right? Looking fresh, and now all of a sudden they're adulterous murderers, right, out of nowhere. Christ brings in this new system of grace, but when he does that, it doesn't say, all right, now you can do whatever you want. It's that Christ now expects more of you in this system of grace than he did. The reason he doesn't give you the same 700-something commands that he gave to the Old Testament is because he feels like with the relationship that we now have with him, he doesn't need to do that with you. Right? That's not necessary anymore because we have more than that. You have far more than Abraham ever had. Even Abraham. You have knowledge of God, the purposes of God, the election of God, the plan of God. You know God. So God expects more of you because of that. Right? Definitely doesn't expect less of you. Grace does not lower the standard by which we're expected to live. It actually ratchets the standard up. I wanted to obey my dad when I was young because I didn't want to get spanked, right? Because he terrified me. He's still jacked up, and he's always going to be stronger than me. It drives me nuts, and he scared me. But now, actually, when I'm 27 years old, and I have 3 children, and I have my own, I have a mortgage, and I've paid my own stuff now for at least half a decade. And he has nothing really to punish me with, right? He's not going to spank me, right? He can't ground me or withhold funds, right? I'm grown up. Right? I pay for all my own stuff, but I want to obey him now far more than I did when I was 4 and scared of being spanked. Because of the relationship I have with him, this grace, my standard of obedience has now actually been ratcheted up. Even though punishment's out of the question, right? I'm not worried about being punished. But I still now want to obey him far more. That's the way Christianity works. Look, I'm not worried about hell anymore. Right? That's out of the question for me. I'm not worried about hell. But I now want to obey Christ far more than I would if I was just trying to escape hell. Because of the relationship I have with him now. Because of this grace. Grace doesn't lower the standard by which we're expected to live. It actually ratchets the standard up. Okay, back to that chapter 1, verse 14 verse. And I may step on some toes here, but you know what? I've gotten to the point where I'm just totally okay with that. And there's even this sadistic part of me that enjoys it a little bit. So, chapter 1, verse 14 says, as obedient children, do not be conformed to the passions of your former ignorance. Love that verse. You know what that phrase really means? You take away its kind of elegance in Peter's poetry. It means don't go back to stupidity again. Right? Don't go back to stupidity again. We're past that. Me and John Bryan actually were doing a question and answer thing. This is John Bryan, by the way. He's helping our church now. He's the man. Anyways, we were doing this question and answer thing for this school up in Birmingham or wherever it was. And one of the questions I had was a kid asked how to better handle temptation and how to avoid temptation. And so I gave a short answer. But one of the things I said was, don't go back to stupidity again. Don't go back to the passions of your former ignorance. Notice that the verse doesn't say that when you become a Christian, those passions will no longer be there. It doesn't say, hey, good news, you believe Jesus now? Now you don't got to worry about those things you've struggled with your whole life. Now those desires that you have, they're going to be gone. No problem. It doesn't say that. He says, do not be conformed to the passions of your former ignorance, which necessarily implies that they're still there. The passions are still there. Now, through the grace of Christ, I believe strongly that those passions will go away. Sometimes that takes a lifetime. But what he says is, do not be conformed to the passions of your former ignorance. You know what I get a lot in ministry is people going back to stupidity again and pretending like I'm stupider. That's funny. Pretending like I'm stupider than I actually am.
How ironic.
With things like Renee, I just don't know how it happened. You know. I've been struggling with I've been trying to stay away from drunkenness, and I was just hanging out with my buddies, and then all of a sudden, drunk again. I don't know. And I'm a good pastor. I give good pastor answers, and I love them, and I say, look, I know it's difficult. I know it's a struggle. Paul struggled too. Romans 7, he was fighting against his flesh, and he lost all the time. I struggle as well. I have things that I mess up with. But what I really want to say is and do something more like this. You don't know how it happened. You don't know how you ended up drunk again. You haven't figured it out by now. What pattern seems to take you to that place. Come on. Can we not go back to stupidity again? Can we just talk about what this really is? An actual struggle, a Christian thing, a very Christian struggle. What's up, Trevor and Chance? Right? Can we just move past you trying to talk to me as if I don't know that you knew exactly what you were doing? Right? Can we just move past that? Can we not go back to stupidity again? Can you not pretend like I'm the dumbest person on the face of the earth? That's what I want to say. I don't say that, of course, but that's what I want to say. Probably even a more common one, and some of the most painful conversations I've ever had in my life. I'm very popular with teenagers, and I know this struggle very well. Very, very akin to it, is teenagers will come to me and say something like, Renee, I just don't know how it happened. And all of a sudden, my girlfriend was in the middle of it, right? Me and my boyfriend in the middle of it. Now, all those conversations, which are painful and tough to have because they're hurt and they're broken, they're repentant. We talk about all the things that are basic Christianity, that God can fully make you whole again. God is overwhelmingly in love with you, loves you no less now than he did before you did it, right? But again, what I want to say is you don't know how you don't know how you and your girlfriend ended up on your way to your house when you knew nobody was home. You don't know how that. You don't know. You don't know how you ended up walking towards your bedroom with the locked front door when nobody. You don't know how that. You don't know how you and your girlfriend actually ended up in your bedroom with a closed door on your bed. You don't know how to. How did we get here? How did this happen? All of a sudden, and we're in the middle of it, right? I just don't know. We just appeared. Like, come on. I mean, that's what I don't say that, of course, but that's what I want to say. That's what I'm thinking about. You don't know? Can we just? Are we not past that? Have we not moved past? I don't know how we got here. Of course you do. Of course you know how you got there. Of course you know how you ended up back in drunkenness again. Of course you know. Insert struggle, sin, really Christian thing here. Of course you know how it happened. Of course you do. The reason it's a struggle is because you've been dealing with it for a long time. You know exactly how it happens. You know what things are going to cause you to be tempted. You just do, right? You're grown people by now, right? You're grown-ups. Let's stop pretending that we just fall backwards into it. We know how it happens. Don't go back to the passions. Don't be conformed. Those passions are still there, guys. The things you struggled with before Christianity, still there. You know what's going to lead you into them. You just do. Can we pretend we're adults now? Can we act like adults? Can we say what it is? You know what takes you there, and you know how to avoid it. I've used this illustration probably 100 times. Not really 100, but probably like 80. But Austin and Jordan have heard it tons of times. But I haven't given it here in probably 3 years. Could have been last year. Who knows? When I first got my boys, they I don't know if you ever dealt with children, like trying to get them ready for bed. Not an easy thing, right? They were 4-year-olds. And especially when they were just miserable human beings. Right? They were awful. They were really bad. But like when I would tell them to do something, they wouldn't actually. Especially with brushing their teeth, right? That's the big one. I'd say, hey, go brush your teeth, and they wouldn't, right? If I didn't tell them, they just never go, right? They would never brush their teeth. But if I did tell them, they would go and they walk back there and they'd be there for like 20 seconds and they come back out and I'd say, go brush your teeth, and they'd say, we did already. No. Man, no, that's not going to do it. So we set a little timer and we give them like 2 minutes or a minute, whatever we did, whatever the boss deemed necessary. And then whenever the alarm went off, they were done, right? And they could finish. What if Trevor came to my house? And this is probably I'm probably going to use Trevor because it's not that far-fetched. But what if Trevor came to my house? And Trevor was hanging out. He's going to spend the night. And Trevor comes in there late at night. We're about to get ready for bed, and he's got his cute little pajamas on, and he says, Renee, how long should I brush my teeth for? What, Trevor? How long should I? I mean, bro, you don't know. I mean, you don't just know. By now, aren't we past me setting a timer for you to brush your teeth? Haven't we moved past that? You don't just know? Renee, I don't know where I should or shouldn't go. I don't know what's going to be best for my Christian life. I don't know. Renee, actually, how far is too far with my girlfriend? Renee, how much should I give at church? Are we not? We're not past that by now. Have we not matured past these things? Is it not? Jesus gave them 700 something commands because they weren't past that. Right? They were children. They didn't know God. They didn't know why he was doing things. We do. We know these things. So he shouldn't have to give us these things. So he doesn't. Grace doesn't lower the standard by which we're expected to live. It actually lifts it up. Almost done. Verse 11. I think it's in chapter 2, actually. It says, Beloved, I urge you as sojourners and exiles to abstain from the passions of the flesh, which wage war against your soul. You have it's really one enemy, according to Ephesians 6, but you really have two big enemies, and one is using the other. You have your flesh that you're battling with every day, that you wake up against every day, and you have Satan and everything that he's got, every bit of ability and power that he's got. He's using your flesh. It says these things wage war. Not like they're going to wake up and like try to give you a hard time, but they wake up waging war against you. You don't think the devil knows what you struggle with? He knows it better than anybody. According to like the C.S. Lewis Screwtape Letters idea, you don't think the demon assigned to you knows how best to tempt you? Of course he does. They are there to wage war against you. They wake up with the goal today of getting your eyes off of Jesus and anywhere else. Whether that means you're profiting and doing well in success, or that means you're paying and you're suffering. Whatever it means, that's what they want. Galatians chapter 5, verse 16, you don't got to turn there, but you can if you don't believe me. It says, walk by the Spirit. I love the terminology here. It says, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. The biblical antidote for struggles and temptations and the flesh in your life is not to focus on the struggles and temptations in the flesh. That's not a good thing. That's not going to work. The biblical antidote is to focus on Christ. Right? Like if you look at a pothole on a motorcycle, you're going to hit the pothole. Right? What they tell you to do, which I found out after hitting many potholes, is to look anywhere else but the pothole. And that's how to avoid the pothole. Same thing. If you want to get past the sin, you don't look at the sin. I really got to beat this drunkenness. I really got to beat sexuality. I really got. You're not going to work. What the Bible says is look to Jesus. Don't fix your eyes on the sin. Fix your eyes on Jesus. That'll take care of itself. That's a lesser thing. Get your eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. Let me close with this, and just as a kind of exhortation reminder. You're never going to be that good at it. I mean, you're just never going to be great at resisting your flesh. And by that, I mean you're never going to be perfect. You're never going to do it all right. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to fall. There is a big difference in a mistake and a choice. But you're going to make mistakes. You're going to fall. You're going to mess up. You're going to come back to God and say, God, I'm sorry. Help me do better. And He'll accept you every time. Loving you no less afterwards than he did before. Because you're striving, because you're trying. That's kind of the point. Right? Romans 4 says that the ones God justifies are the ungodly. You are qualified to be saved precisely because you're not enough. The ones who God saved, he says, I did not come for the godly, I came for the ungodly. I did not come for the healthy, I came for the sick. What qualifies you for salvation is the fact that you're sick. And that you keep coming back to it. What qualifies you for salvation is that you struggle. That you're ungodly. And you know it. So far, Christ has given us an absolute reason for our hope. And the reason's him. His resurrection. His grace that's coming to us. His love of us. His conquering that's on its way. And in response to that, he has asked that we, naturally, as we should naturally, try to obey him. Don't go back to the passions of our former ignorance. Move past stupidity. Move past small childhood into adult relationships with Christ. That want to obey him, not because they're afraid of going to hell, but just because they love him and they desire to obey him. Let's pray. How awesome it always is to come here and to be in the presence of your soldiers that are living on this campus, those that you have here for a time, for an absolute specific reason. It's a blessing to be able to come here and to be fed by them and to have the opportunity to feed them. God, I pray that you would open our hearts to your word. God, help us to be more welcoming to the sword that is the word, to the times that it encourages us, but also to the times that it wounds us. God, help us to always turn to you. Father, I thank you for these men, women, these brothers and sisters of mine, for everything you know they do for my soul. For the encouragement of it is just coming here and seeing them faithfully showing up every week. It says so much about what you're doing to their souls. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thanks, guys. Love you much.